Welcome to the debate. Imagine sitting awake at 3 in the morning reading the granular clauses of a provincial mental health act.
Yeah, which is not exactly late reading.
No, not at all. And you aren't a law student cramming for a final exam. You are reading it because, well, you need to figure out exactly how your own family is planning to have you involuntarily committed to a psychiatric ward by sunrise.
It's an absolutely terrifying scenario.
It really is. So today, we're conducting a thorough analysis of a father named Zakir who demonstrates, frankly, extraordinary resilience and analytical abilities while navigating an intense multi-front crisis. We are looking at a man facing a bitter custody dispute, financial ruin, systemic family betrayal, and, like we just said, the literal threat of forced institutionalization.
And what makes this such a compelling case study is that we aren't looking at a retroactive memoir here.
Right.
This analysis emerges directly from deeply documented source material. We're talking about his real-time correspondence with his wife, his family, his lawyers, and his friends. We are seeing his thought process unfold in the exact moments he is under fire.
Exactly. The central question we are debating today is what primarily drives this father's survival against impossible odds. My position is that Zakir's survival is primarily a triumph of objective, forensic intellectual deduction, which allows him to literally outthink a coordinated legal and medical conspiracy.
And I come at it from a slightly different way. I contend that while his intellect is undeniably formidable, his hyper-analytical framework is actually a profound psychological coping mechanism. I mean, it is a way to impose order on emotional devastation, fueled entirely by his unyielding paternal devotion.
Let's lay out our perspectives clearly here. I posit that Zakir survives by deploying his intellect as a tactical shield against a literal systemic threat. We see in his messages that he is facing what he calls 4 heavy hitters simultaneously.
Right, the job loss and the separation.
Yes, sudden job loss, marital separation, being the sole caregiver for his children, and a highly coordinated smear campaign. But he doesn't just endure these blows. He forensically maps his opponent's strategies.
Which is impressive, I admit.
It's staggering. His survival is rooted in his ability to logically deconstruct his reality. For example, he precisely identifies what he terms litigation framing and double binds. When his family and spouse weaponized the Synth Mental Health Act of 2013 against them, he anticipates the trap.
Because of the substance abuse allegation, right?
Exactly. He deduces that a sudden substance abuse allegation in his wife's divorce petition isn't just a random insult. It is strategically designed to trigger an involuntary admission. By methodically analyzing the legal statutes, he avoids the snare. He survives because he outmaneuvers them.
I hear the tactical brilliance you're highlighting. I really do. But looking at his correspondence, I argue that Zakir's analytical prowess is an adaptive psychological defense mechanism rather than just a cold, tactical strategy.
How so?
Well, consider the profound betrayal he is experiencing. His own sisters have taken his mother's assets. His family has literally cut off his food supply under the guise of what he brilliantly diagnoses as weaponized concern.
Yeah, that phrase is haunting.
It is, and when faced with that level of intimate trauma, human beings usually shatter. I mean, they completely break down. Zakir uses legal and clinical terminology to distance himself from that heartbreak.
So you think it's a buffer?
Exactly. He categorizes their behavior so he doesn't have to feel the full weight of it. Ultimately, his survival is not anchored in his intellect, but in his raw emotional resilience as a caregiver. He endures starvation and isolation because, as he tells his friends, giving up is simply not an option when his children's safety is at stake.
Okay, well, let's test these frameworks against the most concrete example in our source material. Let's look at the medical and legal traps laid for him, specifically regarding the incident at Liaquat National Hospital.
Ah, yes, the hospital visit.
This is where his forensic intellect is just on full display. Zakir is taken to a psychiatrist under the guise of treating his high blood pressure. He's handed medication, but he absolutely refuses to take it.
Right, and to a casual observer or, a judge reading a medical report, refusing prescribed medication looks like paranoia or noncompliance.
Exactly, which is the sheer beauty of the trap. But Zakir connects the dots between this seemingly innocent hospital visit and a sudden claim in his wife's petition alleging substance abuse. He deduces, and he's correct, that if he takes the prescribed psychiatric medicine, he risks a false positive for LSD on a subsequent drug test.
Which would immediately cost him custody of his children, Zainab and Zarar.
Precisely. Now, if you're listening to this, you might be wondering, well, why doesn't this guy just hire a lawyer, hand over the case files, and get some sleep?
Right, why play detective?
Exactly. Why is he playing detective? But you have to understand the level of isolation and the speed at which this is happening. He knows that refusing the medication creates a secondary, equally dangerous trap.
The non-compliance trap.
Yes. He dives into the actual text of the Sindh Mental Health Act of 2013. He realizes that under sections 10, 11, and 15, his wife or sisters can report his refusal of the medication as noncompliance, and this noncompliance serves as the clinical justification for forced involuntary admission to a psychiatric facility.
And once he is institutionalized, a guardian is appointed over his estate.
Yes.
That guardian would have the legal authority to liquidate all his assets within 90 days. I mean, it is a breathtakingly sophisticated trap.
It is staggering. They're attempting to lock him in a literal double bond. Take the pills and lose your kids to a failed drug test, or refuse the pills and lose your freedom and assets to the Mental Health Act.
It's a lose-lose scenario.
Exactly. I see why you view his analysis of this as a psychological shield, but how can we deny that this is an objective, highly accurate threat assessment? He explicitly quotes Section 52(1) of the Act, which makes it a punishable offense to willfully make a false statement with the intent to get someone detained.
True. He uses the exact text.
He uses the exact text of the law to neutralize the threat. His intellect is literally keeping him out of an institution.
I hear you. I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that it stops at tactical utility. Let me tell you why. I am not denying the accuracy of his deduction. It's brilliant. But we have to ask why he is engaging in this level of forensic research, and more importantly, how his brain is allowing him to do it.
What do you mean by how?
Well, look at his situation. He is isolated in his own home. His siblings are conspiring against him. His mother's financial power of attorney has been seized.
He is entirely under siege?
He is rendered utterly powerless by the people who are supposed to love him the most. Now let's talk about the psychological mechanism of what happens when a human being experiences that kind of profound, intimate betrayal.
The emotional fallout.
Exactly. The brain's threat center, the amygdala, goes into absolute overdrive. The natural response is panic, rage, or total emotional collapse. To prevent that collapse, the brain sometimes shifts the processing of that trauma entirely into the prefrontal cortex, the logic center. It is a recognized defense mechanism called intellectualization.
Wait, are you saying the legal threat wasn't real and he was just imagining a puzzle to solve?
No, not at all. The threat was incredibly real, but his hyperfixation on the precise legal mechanics, the 90-day liquidation window, the specific subsections of the act, that is how his mind metabolizes the trauma.
I see.
Look at how he talks to his friend Asim or his friend Faizan in the text messages. He calls his family's actions an operational protocol. He says they're using a very potent and amazing strategy for my health.
There's a lot of dark sarcasm there.
Huge amounts. That sarcasm, that intense clinical detachment, isn't just a guy preparing a legal brief. It is a psychological anchor. If he stops to actually process the fact that his own sisters are actively trying to have him subjected to electroconvulsive therapy to steal his house, he breaks.
That is a grim reality to face.
It is. The intellect is a shield against trauma, not just a shield against a courtroom.
Okay, you mentioned his mind preventing a collapse, and I think that shift into absolute logic is exactly what we see when we move from the clinical setting to his own living room.
Because dodging a psychiatrist is one thing, but decrypting a text message from your spouse requires an entirely different application of that intellect.
Oh, the text messages are a fascinating part of this.
They really are. Look at how he dissects his wife's messages. She sends him these very polite, structured texts about healthy co-parenting and hoping he gets professional help for his stability.
And she asks if she can send food over to the house via Bikria, which is a local delivery service.
Right. Now, an ordinary person in a marital crisis might just read that as a peace offering, or perhaps they'd get angry and send an emotional reply. Zakir does neither.
He analyzes it.
He performs a real-time linguistic analysis of her texts. He identifies her speech pattern as a total departure from her normal voice. He notes the deliberate confusion, the shifting of responsibility, and the constructed uncertainty. He realizes she is maintaining what he calls a wall of gray rock.
Which is fascinating because gray rocking is typically a psychological technique used by victims of abuse.
Exactly.
You give short, uninteresting, non-committal answers to make yourself as boring as a gray rock so a manipulative person loses interest in you. But Zakir spots that she has inverted the technique. She is using the aesthetic of a gray rock to stonewall him while appearing perfectly calm on paper.
Exactly. He realizes she isn't texting him at all. She is writing these messages for the family court judge. She is creating a pristine paper trail for the archives.
It's all performative.
Totally performative. He is functioning like a cryptographer behind enemy lines. He isn't just reading her messages, he is decrypting their ultimate legal intent. When she politely offers to send food over, he recognizes it as a catch-22.
It looks like compassion, but it's a trap.
A massive trap. Just think about the mechanics of it. If he says yes to the food delivery, she prints the screenshot for the court to prove he is financially unstable. She argues he is unable to feed his own children and therefore an incapable provider.
And if he says no?
If he says no, she uses the exact same screenshot to show she is the reasonable, compassionate mother trying to help, and he is stubbornly endangering the kids out of spite. He spots the litigation framing in real time.
It really is an impossible situation.
It is. And this isn't just a man intellectualizing his feelings to soothe his ego. This is a man decrypting enemy intelligence to survive a siege.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered the necessity of the translation itself? You're focusing on the output, the decryption of the trap. I'm focusing on the language he uses to categorize it.
What do you mean?
Why does he use phrases like parasitic nature to describe his wife? Why does he categorize his family's starvation tactics as weaponized compassion and weaponized concern?
Well, because it accurately describes their methodology. They are using the aesthetics of care, offering zakat, sending home-cooked food through a friend's wife to humiliate him, and build a case of incompetence.
But let's look at the emotional reality beneath those words. His own family has cut off his food. He is literally starving in his own home.
True.
Friends are offering him zakat, which is charitable alms, and for a proud father and provider, that is profoundly humiliating. He notes in the correspondence that his wife is spending money on luxury home renovations while simultaneously trying to starve him and the children out, forcing them to travel around the city while sick.
It's remarkably cruel.
It is. And if Zakir allows himself to feel the raw, unfiltered devastation of that sheer cruelty of his wife and sisters leveraging his children's hunger to win a custody narrative, it would destroy him.
So you're arguing the terminology is a buffer?
Exactly. By diagnosing her actions as parasitic, he turns her from a beloved spouse who is betraying him into a biological pathogen that he simply needs to isolate from the host. By labeling the family's tactics as weaponized concern, he places their cruelty into a clinical box.
I see your point.
He tells his friend, "I am learning something new even in this situation." That is the definition of intellectualizing trauma. He is turning his abusers into objects of study so they can't break his heart.
I see why you think that, but I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it diminishes the very real, very dangerous chess match he is forced to play.
How does it diminish it?
You call it categorizing cruelty to survive it. I call it maintaining the necessary objectivity to not make a fatal legal error. He explicitly tells his friend Faizan that he is to dodge an unprecedented number of traps.
Right, the sheer volume of them.
Yes. If he allows emotion to cloud his judgment, even for a second, he loses his children. The intellect isn't just making him feel better by putting things in a box. It's keeping the wolves from the door.
But let's look at what's actually happening behind that door. This is where I think the purely tactical argument hits a wall. Despite his incredibly sophisticated legal mapping, despite his brilliant linguistic decryption of his wife's texts, Zakir's actual day-to-day reality is profoundly visceral and devastatingly simple.
You mean the financial and physical strain?
The sheer exhaustion of it. He is completely broke. He has to message his friend Faizan to borrow 5,000 rupees just to get through the week.
Which is not a lot of money, highlighting how desperate things were.
Exactly. He is sitting up all night, exhausted, applying lotion to his son Zarar, who has contracted chickenpox. He's terrified that his daughter Zainab will catch it next. He has no money for the commute to the courts. He is dealing with the crushing weight of physical isolation.
It's an immense burden.
It is, and my point is this. An intellect, no matter how brilliant, no matter how good it is at reading the Sindh Mental Health Act, collapses under the weight of that kind of isolation if it isn't anchored to something deeper.
Anchored to his kids.
Right. You can only decrypt so many legal traps before biological exhaustion takes over. The only reason he doesn't voluntarily walk into that mental hospital just to get a warm bed and some rest is his unconditional love for Zainab and Zarar. He explicitly says it in the text, his heart would stop without them.
It's a very powerful statement.
He tells his wife, I know you will die without them. I won't work hard to earn them. I know my heart will stop right then. His resilience isn't a product of his brain, it's a product of his heart. When his intellect tells him the mathematical odds of survival are 0, his paternal devotion overrides the math. As he says, giving up is not an option.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. I don't disagree that paternal love is his anchor, but love alone does not win custody battles.
Well, no, but
Love alone does not defeat a coordinated, multi-party litigation strategy.
love is the reason he fights it all.
Paternal love is the fuel, absolutely. But his intellect is the engine. And without the engine, the fuel just burns up in a flash of useless anger.
How so?
Let's look at how he handles the family court proceedings. He strategically accepts the khula. For our listeners, a khula is a divorce initiated by the wife under Islamic law, which typically involves her relinquishing certain financial claims or dowry. By actively accepting it instead of fighting it, Zakir instantly removes her leverage.
It's a bold move.
It is. Furthermore, he tells his lawyer to let the court proceed ex parte, meaning let the hearing happen without him even being in the room. He actively chooses not to show up.
Because he knows it's a procedural trap to drain his energy and finances.
Exactly. If he were acting purely on raw emotional devotion, he would have stormed the gates. He would have shown up to court to fight every single accusation in that petition with rage and passion to defend his honor as a father.
Which is exactly what his opponents wanted him to do. If he reacts with emotional outrage to the substance abuse lies, he looks unhinged, proving their point that he needs psychiatric intervention.
Right. But his intellect overrides that emotional impulse. He tells his friend, let her take the khula. The burden of proof is on her. He actively chooses to stay home and apply calamine lotion to Zara's chicken pox rather than show up to a court date.
Prioritizing his son over his pride.
Yes. He deliberately holds back his own evidence, the CCTV footage, the audio recordings, knowing that playing his hand too early would be a tactical disaster. His love gives him the reason to survive, but his forensic intellect provides the specific mechanism of survival.
That is a very strong point, but look at how intertwined the two actually are in practice. You say he stays home to put lotion on Zarar instead of going to the procedural trap. That is an intellectual victory. Yes, he is optimizing his legal and financial resources. But look at the text message he sends his friend Awesome about that exact moment.
Which one?
He says, "These women are building property and we are applying lotion to kids with chickenpox." There is a deep, profound moral clarity in that statement.
He sees the contrasting priorities.
Yes, his intellect allows him to see the trap, but it is his moral and emotional grounding as a father that allows him to accept the humiliation of staying home. He doesn't care if he looks weak to the court or if he looks defeated to his family, as long as his sick son is comforted. His intellect operates entirely in service to his emotional reality.
Which brings us to a remarkable convergence in this case study. We're looking at a man who is withstanding simultaneous, highly coordinated campaigns against his finances, his reputation, his legal standing, and his sanity.
Orchestrated by the very people who should have been his primary support system.
Yes. And whether you view his survival as a testament to the power of a hyper-vigilant, forensic intellect deconstructing medical and legal traps, or as a brilliantly adaptive psychological shield protecting a father's raw devotion, what we are ultimately looking at is an extraordinary case study in human endurance.
Absolutely. Zakir's story forces us to look at survival through a dual lens. You cannot separate the mind that decrypts a legal patch 22 from the heart that breaks over a child's fever.
Very well said.
The material gives us profound insight into how individuals navigate absolute systemic pressure. The intellect compartmentalizes the trauma so the heart can keep beating. And the heart keeps beating so the intellect can solve the next puzzle.
It is a profound feedback loop of resilience. To summarize my perspective, Zakir survives against all odds because he refuses to be a passive victim. He actively decodes the mechanisms of his destruction, from the Sind Mental Health Act to the linguistic manipulations in a text message, and he uses rigorous logic to dismantle a conspiracy that relies entirely on him making an emotional mistake.
And to summarize my view, that incredible analytical framework is, at its core, a psychological coping mechanism. It is the mental armor he constructs to endure starvation, isolation, and systemic family betrayal, all of which is driven by an unyielding, primal devotion to his children.
What this correspondence ultimately reveals is that resilience isn't just about enduring pain. It is about the incredible capacity of the human mind to construct an entirely new architecture of survival when the social contract of family completely disintegrates.
It shows us how deeply we can dig when we have a reason to keep going.
There's always more to explore in the material, and we leave it to you, the listener, to weigh the evidence and draw your own conclusions about the true nature of resilience. Thank you for joining us on